I want this game to feel like, almost like it's not a real video game. It's a game like you saw on like a friend's console that you didn't own when you were like a kid, and you like only kinda remember it, but you remember seeing it and going like, what the heck is that? And so a lot of the visuals were very like, how do I evoke that? I'd like reach into my mind and think like, what are these like feelings of like, that was really cool, or I really like this look, that I can't point to. I can't tell you where I saw it or what it was. Just that like I can see it in my mind and I'm like, whatever it was cool.
Hello everyone and welcome back to Backlog Banter. My name is Hazell and this is Dev Dive, a show where I get a chance to talk to interesting game developers about their games. And today I am joined by the two-person team behind Hyperbeat, a very interesting and I think very, very cool rhythm game that I got a chance to play at PAX earlier this year, and now I'm playing the full release. It's out and everyone can go try it on Steam. I'll leave the link in the description to go buy it. But today we've got Alice Bottino and Chance Wallin here to talk about Hyperbeat and everything that went into making this game that I've been following for a little over a year, and now it's finally here. Alice, Chance, thank you very much for sitting down with me and finally getting this interview going to explore the story behind Hyperbeat.
Hey, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Tucker.
Have you guys done other interviews for Hyperbeat, or?
I've done I want to say 2 before it came out. Some people interviewed me about the game and stuff I had done previously, but none since it came out.
Yeah, well, it's one of my favorite things to do it after the game has come out or as the game is coming out, because I feel like then you're finally able to reflect on what was the project like on the whole. And so this is going to be that complete story. The game is out. You can reflect a little bit on it. You've done a little bit of post-launch support, getting things ready for Steam Deck, all this stuff. But let's go back to before the beginning. Let's talk about each of you and how you got involved in making games, period. And Chance, let's start with you. What's your connection to the games industry and your kind of history of working with games?
I think that I'm actually kind of like a games industry outsider. My connection really is to Alice. Like, Alice and I are childhood best friends. So like our first video games we were making in like the back of her I don't even know what to call that room, Alice. Like the computer room
like
at your family
we were
house.
like, in the like the living room.
Yeah.
There was like a desk in the living room, and we just like set up computers in there.
It was kind of like, I think, Risk of Rain or something. Like I would do the music and I was doing like the art assets, and like Alice was like learning how to program. Like almost a decade went by, and I think that Alice and I were both kind of in positions in our careers where it kind of just made sense to try. We had a prototype that was like doing pretty well, and then we kind of both had a fizzling of our corporate journey in one way or another, and it was like, let's just try to make a video game.
When was it? Like, how old were you guys when you started making your first games, you think?
Oh man,
So like it was like in the middle of high school, so we were probably like 16.
it never went anywhere just because like, in order to make a game with somebody, you have to have stellar communication skills, planning skills, just like nothing teenagers are equipped to have.
We almost killed each other. That was almost the end
other.
of our friendship, was that first game together.
Yeah.
And it was, I think like we had this huge fight that was over like a animation that was like 4 frames long, and like it was like 6 pixels different. Like it was barely anything. But Chance made an animation, and I was like, I don't like this. I'm gonna make it different. Chance's like, are you just changing things I'm doing? And I was like, yeah, but it's better. And Chance was like, and I was just like, it was like, I mean, I'm like a teenager. I don't know how to like properly collaborate with another creator. So it was wild.
Well, who won? Whose animation was in the final project?
I think it was mine. Well, because I'm like the engineer and like the programmer, like I kind of like can do whatever I want when it goes in the project, because it's like, what's Chance gonna do? Like learn Unity just to change this one animation? Like,
Well, Alice, Chance mentioned that he was kind of an outsider to the games industry, but as proof by the poster behind you, you have a little bit of an involvement in the games industry. And so let's talk about your journey getting in and what kind of projects you worked on previous to Hyperbeat.
yeah. So my like journey in games started really young. I was in middle school, and we had extra classes that were like, it was like a computer class. We did like a bunch of typing things, and I was always like a mischievous computer kid, so I couldn't type without looking at the keyboard. And they put like this rubber thing over it. So I found out that my girlfriend at the time had finished all the typing assignments, so I like copied her save file from the cloud drive into mine.
I crashed out about this because I had to do it. I was in this class and I had to do the typing assignments, and Alice got out of it.
Yeah, and I did it. I did it earlier than everybody else, and it was like my teacher's like, "Wow, you're so good at typing." I was terrible at typing, but I could get into the C drive and copy a file.
She'd be playing Flash games while I'm fighting for my life over there, and I'm just unbelievably envious.
And so then when you finished the typing thing, they had us move on to MIT's Scratch, which kind of like lets you learn what programming is and how to make games. And I thought it was really interesting. I did some stuff, and then I made like a little game, and Scratch has like a whole website. You can upload it and send it to people. So I was like sending it to a couple friends in the class, and a friend played it and then gave the link to their friend sitting next to them. So someone I didn't know, and they played it, and they looked at the screen and they were like, "Whoa, this is really fun." And I felt like the click in my brain. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's the thing. That's what we're doing for our life. Yep, okay. And I've basically been one track ever since. I asked my teacher then, I was like, "Hey, do you have any books on learning programming? Like, I want to make games." And he like was like, I don't know. And like dug some old Visual Basics book out of the back that I pretended like I knew what it said. But really it all went over my head. And so I tried learning programming a little bit. I did a bunch of stuff in Scratch. But by the point I was asking my geometry teacher to give me the advanced trigonometry books, because I was trying to render a 3D object in Scratch, but I didn't know trig, which really was not helping. And so I'm like, "Teach, can I have a trig book?" And she's like, "Why? Like, you're like 2 years out from that." And so at that point, I kind of gave up, and I was like, maybe programming's not for me. And I decided, and I found out, like, oh, there's game designers, like these people that, like, they don't do the programming, but there's this whole field of, like, what are games? And that fascinated me, both from, like a technical, like, how do you make rules, as well as, like, I grew up with a family of artists, so the idea of, like, games and interactive media as an art form, like, blew my mind. And so I bought Jesse Schell's The Art of Game Design book, and I would drive Chance to school and out like a period early to high school because he had band, and then I would just hang out in the school until school started, and I would just like sit under some stairs and read that book for like a year. I finished that book, and I consumed like everything game design I could get my hands on, and I eventually realized like no one will program your games for you when you are a high schooler who doesn't know what they're doing. So I was like, fine, I guess I'll get back into programming. And that's when I picked up Unity. And I've basically been using Unity ever since, and doing indie games. I have just been doing small indie stuff. When I graduated high school, I used like the graduation gift money I got from a bunch of family to buy a HTC Vive, because mostly because I wanted it, but I could pretend like it was for my career or whatever. And so then I made a VR game called Freeze Climbing, which you shouldn't buy or play. It's not good. Or maybe it was good at one point in time, but it barely works now on newer hardware. Made a bunch of game jams and prototypes, like a lot of prototypes. I've probably made 10 times as many games as I've put out into the public privately that never launched, or maybe like 20, 25 times of like just projects that are semi-complete that I went, this is cool enough, but I don't want to ship it. I went to community college. I took a couple years off. I worked at Amazon at a call center and shipped that VR game. And then I went to community college. Ostensibly, I was going to get a computer science degree, But 2 years in, I ran out of money. So I was like, guess I'm dropping out of community college. And I applied to a boatload of jobs. And I was lucky enough to actually get a job in the games industry at Xbox. So I worked as a quality analyst at Xbox, working on Age of Empires 4. I did that for 3 years. And then at the end of it, I was pretty tired of QA work on a live service game. That was getting pretty tired. And so I applied to some places, and thankfully through Seattle Indies, which is like a nonprofit in Seattle that's like for indie game developers, I met my friend Brad, who got me a job at Harebrained Schemes, working on the Lamplighters League. I did that for 3 years until Lamplighters Harebrained closed down. And when that happened, I looked at kind of where Harebrained was going and what they were doing, and trying to decide if I wanted to stick with them. And I had this game jam called Hyper Night that I thought was really cool and maybe could be something. And so I decided I was going to not follow Harebrained and try doing my own thing. And then about 3 years later, here we are. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, we might as well explore a little bit more about that game jam game, Hyper Night. What was the story behind that game being created, the concept of it, and when was it that you were making that first, that prototype, that jam game?
I started that for the Seattle Indies Slow Jam, which is just like a 2-week long game jam that Seattle Indies runs. Originally, it was nothing like what the game you know today. It was actually supposed to be like a mix between the Flash game Run and Sonic and the Black Knight, because literally like the day the game jam started, a friend introduced me to Sonic and the Black Knight. And I'm not like a Sonic fan, but I'm like, you're telling me someone looked at Sonic and went, I want to give that guy a sword. And then like a whole executive team signed off on that. That's rad. And so I was like, oh, I want to take that gameplay, but like if it was Run, so you're like, it's just Run with a sword, that would be sick. And I tried making it, and it was terrible. It was terrible. It was so bad. And I was like, okay, this just isn't working. I need to do something else. So I kind of made the character move around instead of running on the edge. Like, I was like, oh, if you had a gamepad, you could like move the joystick and the character would just be where your joystick is. It's like a type of movement I feel like games don't really use. I was like, okay, you're flying around. What now? I was like, I don't know. Maybe like Superman 64. There's like rings you fly through. Sure. So I spawned some rings. And I was like, okay, I got to test like the game feel of it. So I'll put a sound effect on it. And I just reached for the first one I had, which was in my downloads folder, and it was a metronome click.
Okay.
And then I like sat down and played it, and you're flying through these rings, and it's going click, 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 click. And I went, oh, god damn it, it's a rhythm game. And it's good. Oh no, because everyone says like, don't make a rhythm game. Like, they're really hard to make and they're really like annoying technically. Don't make a rhythm game. And I was like, oh god damn it, it's good. That means I have to make it. But everyone says don't make a rhythm game. So I decided to sit down and make a rhythm game. So that was like 1 week into the 2-week jam that I decided to pivot. And when I decided to make it a rhythm game, I was like, oh, I need music. And there's this previous game jam that me and Chance and his partner Michael decided to do together, which was it
was so ambitious for what it was. It was really ambitious.
You're like a cockroach, and then
No,
you're like
I got you.
Human.
You're
human. You got it, Chance. You got it.
Yeah. So you're like a DJ in the middle. Do you know what Boiler Room is, Tucker?
I'm not familiar with Boiler Room.
It's like a YouTube channel where they'll show like parties where there'll just be like a DJ in this like sea of people. It's like the crowd's all around the deck. So that was kind of the idea, that like you're this DJ and the crowd is all these like cockroaches, and you have this like big box of vinyls next to you, and you can like put on music, but like there's only certain songs that the cockroaches like. So you have to like read the crowd, and then like they'd climb up and eat you or something like it. And so we were like, I made like 15 songs in like
Wow.
5 days, and they weren't stellar. It was just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
make a beat, make a beat, make a beat. There was some hits. There was some hits.
There were some
There's
real hits.
There's some hits.
Chance is always so like, oh, it's okay music. He says that still today about like the Hyperbeat soundtrack sometimes. And I'm like, bro, everything is a banger.
The Hyperbeat soundtrack that's getting a vinyl. Like, come
on. And so we made that game jam, but it didn't like work out.
Yeah.
And so after we made that, there were several game jams I did after that where I'm like, oh, I finished the game, deadline's in like 3 hours. I forgot music. What do I do? And I just opened the like Roach game and I'd be like, we're gonna take this one, and I'd put it in the game, and then I'd DM Chance to be like, hey, is it okay if I use this? Just so you know, I already used it. So, I would just kind of like steal things from that. And when it came to making the rhythm game for the game jam, I decided to pull some more of those. Now that Hyperbeat's out, I may actually like clean up and put out the Hyper Night game jam so that people can kind of see where it came from.
Yeah.
I originally took it down because I had several people tell me where I was like, oh, I'm working on this game Hyperbeat, it has a Steam page, and then someone would like message me and be like, oh, I played Hyperbeat and it was so much fun, and I'm like, you did what? And I'm like, oh, they're finding the Hyper Night page and playing it, but it is not good. Like the timing, the way it lines up with the music, the way the gameplay works, like it was the first time I had ever made a rhythm game. I had no idea what I was doing. So I decided to take it down, but I'd like to put it back up now that the game is out there.
The confusion wouldn't hurt it.
Yeah.
So Chance, how did you, what was the first time you heard about Hyperbeat? And how was it that you came to make this a big project that the two of you were collaborating on?
Totally. I think, honestly, Hyperbeat didn't exist until, like, I want to say probably halfway into development. It was always Hyper Night for a really long time. And Alice kind of showed me the jam game. I had always been a musician writing music, always in my spare time. And I think that Alice kind of just came to me and presented me a project, and that's what I was looking for. So it honestly was like, she's like, I made this rhythm game. She sat me down and I played it. I was like, this is the sickest thing I've ever seen. Like, I'll do it. So literally it was just like the next day I just kind of started making tunes. We fought over the name for a long time. There's another game called Hyper Night out there, which is why we changed the name.
On Steam it's called Hyper Nights. And if it was just like another game that like was just some indie that put out and it has like one review, I wouldn't mind having that conflict so much. But it's made by like a somewhat popular like game dev YouTuber, and so I was like, oh, I'd rather just like kind of like step away from that, like fix the SEO on it, so that like we don't have a problem, like a conflict there.
Alice, I think that like on the shelf to the left of you is the piece of paper where we brainstormed all the names.
It is, yeah.
That might be right fun to show.
Here. Okay, cool.
Because I think I went to Chance and I was like, oh, Chance, we gotta change the name. I don't want to because I like it, but we have to change the name. Yeah, you can see here, this is like all the names.
Yeah.
And then here we have Hyperbeat.
Oh, awesome.
The little, yeah.
Yeah, there was the game was almost also called Soul Weaver, which I thought would have been sick.
Soul Weaver?
Yeah, we'll save that one for the future.
Yeah, we like circled it and we're like, this is a good one.
I was like,
I love this name. I don't know if it fits this game, but I love it. So we may be saving that for the next one.
Sure, yeah. Well, I also want to explore your relation to rhythm games. As you were saying, it kind of just happened that you ended up making a rhythm game, but I'm curious for the both of you what your connection to rhythm games is previous to making one yourselves. Do you have any ones that you remember playing when you were growing up? Any personal favorites that you revisit? What's your dynamic with the rhythm game genre outside of making one?
I played a ton of rhythm games. I didn't have a PlayStation growing up, so I missed like was it on the PS1? Vib Ribbon. I missed Vib Ribbon, I missed Rez, I missed like Parappa the Rapper. I played my first introduction was Guitar Hero, which I was obsessed with as a child, and then Osu. And so when Alice showed me Hyperbeat eventually, she showed me with the tablet, I was like, oh, this is the neurons in my brain, like the connections are already there, it's firing for me. But I think that like rhythm games, just they're titles that really have stuck with me over my life. I've played a lot of games, but I think that just like that experience of like with Thumper or just like anything the music with the visuals and everything really just leads to an experience that's almost unforgettable. So I think I've always just been really attracted to the idea of rhythm games. But as Alice was saying, it's really hard to do, and the market's so weird for it. There's so many people that used to play rhythm games that don't play rhythm games now, and that's almost like the target audience for Hyperbeat, is that like you used to play Osu, you used to play Patapon, so I love rhythm games though, and I think that right now there's a really good like indie renaissance of rhythm games. We went to this like conference over the summer. We just met so many great developers that are doing such interesting things and like really evolving the conversation about what a rhythm game can be.
It feels like there's like two classifications of rhythm games. There's sort of the modern rhythm games, which are all like, I guess I would call them like arcade rhythm games, which almost feel more like a sport. Like it's about the performance and skill. And then there's this sort of like the older like console rhythm games, like Guitar Hero, or especially like Patapon, like back in the day, or Guitaroo Man, like the sort of like, oh, it is a rhythm game, but like it's also like a video game. Like it has like characters and a story and like a structure in a way that like a lot of arcade rhythm games don't. And so I didn't play a lot of rhythm games once I sort of like grew out of like being a console gamer, because eventually I bought a PC and then I've been a PC gamer pretty much since then. I loved Patapon and like Vib Ribbon back on the PS1, and like these were really cool games. I love Guitar Hero, but then when I moved on to PC, a lot of the PC rhythm games were arcade rhythm games. They're tap the buttons and to the rhythm, and that like wasn't enough of a hook for me, because it's just not like the kind of activity that I do for like the sport of it. And so it's been kind of weird making a rhythm game as what I would call like a rhythm game outsider. Some of the struggles of Hyperbeat and the decisions we had to make were about balancing, like, we know there's going to be a lot of people, especially coming from like Osu, that are expecting like sort of the flow and the like all the features around an arcade rhythm game, but also we want to make a game that can be playable for people who are a little turned off by that, who like the old like sort of console rhythm games that had like a bit of a story and they weren't asking you to be the best in the world. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm curious then what you see as what makes Hyperbeat different in the modern market of rhythm games. It's a game that I think visually stands out quite a bit. Gameplay-wise, there's not a lot like it. Rez is maybe one of the only things I could compare it to, and I'm not even personally a really big fan of Rez. So I'm curious where you see it as standing out and where those decisions were made to make it something that could appeal to not the major market, because I think you're right, something like Osu is probably the big modern rhythm game, but something that is a little bit more targeted towards a different demographic. What were some of those decisions that made it distinct?
So from the gameplay side, it probably the like origin seed of it being so different is that originally the game jam was only playable on a gamepad. Mouse and keyboard controls didn't actually get added until like a year after we started working on it, because to me, like the limitations of the circle and like the way that the game was built was originally built for controller. as I was like making song or like charts, and as I was designing the game, it was very important to me that this game is playable on a controller. That like it's not just like, oh, an accessibility thing, but it's like a first class controller is as viable of an input method as mouse and keyboard. I was very adamant that we do not have a fail state. Because many people were like confused that there was no fail state, and I was like, yeah, because fail states in rhythm games suck. Because you're like, oh, I'm kind of getting into it, I'm starting to learn, and then the game says you're not good enough, so you don't get to keep playing.
No, I had that experience, especially with Parappa the Rapper, the first game, where I really like that game a lot, but there's a couple stages that, like, the timing is not designed properly, and so you just get like kicked out, and you're like, well, time to do that part again.
Yeah.
So I like that. Yeah. And what are your thoughts, Chance, on like what makes this game unique?
Two things I would say is, one, maybe the not so obvious is like the progression system that we put in the game. We basically like along with the fail state system, like we spent a lot of time thinking about how if somebody is not very good at the game, that they're still able to see every part of it, like with the gem system. So we didn't want to like make people like, hey, you can play level 1 difficulty, but in order to see the story, like you're going to have to lock in and do a level 2 or you know what I'm saying? Just for some people that isn't possible, but they're still like having fun on the lower difficulties. And I think that that kind of paired with just like this like Animal Crossing Dark Souls like style like rotating dialogue system that it's just it's definitely different. And there's not a lot of rhythm games that even let you like customize your character too. I think that a lot of the places in which like just like Hyperbeat stepped outside the rhythm game genre, and because of that it's being compared to games that are like not rhythm games, which is really interesting. I feel like that doesn't happen so much for other games.
Were there games outside of rhythm games that you were using as design touchstones or pacing touchstones, or things that you're like, okay, this is not solely inspired by rhythm games? What were some of those other areas?
One that I feel like a lot of people notice right away is like the sort of like the Dark Souls vibes and references. I'm like a really big Souls head, and especially Dark Souls 1 is like so near and dear to my heart. I played that game and immediately I was like, oh, every game I make from now on will probably have some Dark Souls in it, because it's like so, it sticks with me so much.
This is the Dark Souls of rhythm games.
Yeah. And so I bless his heart, Chance put up with me. I had so many, like, I asked so much of him, and I was like, yo, like, you could write like a normal story, but what if instead I forced you to write this weird esoteric story where like the characters are all like moody and like everyone talks about things in like metaphor, and thankfully Chance sort of went outside that box and made something way better than anything I could have dreamed up. But originally I was asking for like this weird, I was like, what if it was like Dark Souls? Chance is like, what the fuck do you mean? And I was like, kind of like Dark Souls.
Tucker, I feel like the answer to your question is really just like Alice and I, we have some, like on the Venn diagram of our tastes, there's overlap for sure. But I think Hyperbeat was like us both trying to put the influences that we loved inside of the game. So for me, it was like Persona, Danganronpa, like all these, like all those types of games. And then for Alice, it's like Rocket League, Dark Souls. And so like it was just us kind of like pulling each other in separate directions. And I think that like we've talked about this, like the Dreamware formula is like pairing this like really fast-paced parkour gamer gameplay with like a slower paced like hub world with a story, like taking that idea maybe to a new project, because I don't know, I enjoy those types of like really fast-paced parkour games, but I need a break. I need to decompress for a second between songs, and I think that's
my guy.
Yeah, right. So I'm like, I can chat with somebody and change out my outfit before I'm ready to go again. I'm locked out.
No, yeah, I mean, this is one of the most narrative focused rhythm games I've played, and I think it's really special because of that. And what I think immediately jumps out at me, as someone who's played a lot of rhythm games, but again, even to the point of there being other rhythm games that do have more of a world or narrative or characters, they're usually cartoonishly simple. I mean, something like Space Channel 5 or like Parappa the Rapper is like, they're intentionally goofy. They're intentionally simple. But Hyperbeat is a little more, it's got a little more texture going on with like the themes and the ways that the characters are portraying themselves. And so, Chance, here's the opportunity for you to give the story behind why this game ended up the way it did narratively. Because it's a little bit anachronistic, but I think it ends up harmonizing in a way of like, man, we're just trying to figure things out. We're just trying to make it work, man. Like it's very much a game where I feel like if I don't really smoke, but if I took a giant puff and I said something one of the characters said, like, it would make a lot of sense.
Totally. No, I feel you. I think that Alice and I kind of built the narrative out of, instead of like doing, I think, traditional world building that happens with a lot of video games, we really just kind of focused on like creating the characters as like different sort of archetypes of people that we've met. Like being a creative, you just meet a lot of different types of artists, and they kind of your cat. What's your cat's name, Tucker?
That's Jesse.
Oh, I love Jesse. Just we built it from the characters instead of like the world. So I kind of think that like Hyperbeat, the Wellspring almost kind of feels like this place out of time. Like if my hope is that in 20 years, if you play Hyperbeat, you'd have a hard time saying when the game released. And I think that we tried to just keep it like really characters obviously exaggerated over the top, but like human, like they're all kind of these exaggerations of emotions that all of us have. And I think at one point in our lives, being an artist or being a creative, that like you can see bits of yourself in kind of all of those characters. I think that honestly, like the story was one of the last things to kind of come together, and the system for the story, I think the game released on Wednesday, and I think it existed in its completion on Monday. And so I think that like if we had more time, Alice and I probably would change some pacing things or try to do things. But I think that on the whole, like it has a very different story to tell than like a lot of other rhythm games. And that's not bad. I think that just like we just tried to do something different because we're like, we don't know. Most rhythm games don't have a story. We might as well try something unique, I guess.
Yeah. So for the two of you coming up with this world and these characters and the tone of the game, I think the narrative for me is the biggest tone setting piece. The way that their characters talk about themselves, the way that it's very self-reflective and existential, those are what create the vibe of the Wellspring and of what I'm bringing to the game. And so these themes of emotion and identity and artistry, why do you think those found the way into this rhythm game? Again, that's very rare, but why didn't you go with something a little bit more simplistic? Why'd you feel like this was the right space to explore that?
Oh, that's a really good question. Honestly, I'm going to be real with you. I don't think we even thought about it. It was kind of just like, this feels right. And that's the thing is like, if I'm also being honest, like there was many parts in development was tough, and there was a lot of parts we were kind of consistently almost like a month away from release, like 3 months away from release. It was kind of this like never ending cycle. And so a lot of the dialogue I wrote kind of just, it was like I didn't even know if it was going to be in the game. Do you know what I'm saying? Because we didn't know how much like the system was going to be like functional or working. But I think that the thing that we held on to was kind of just like the metaphor is why everything kind of got in there, is that kind of just a parallel of like, I think the true message behind Hyperbeat in many ways is that believing in your ability to have the capacity to change and learn new things, and believing in your potential to do that. And I think that it fit the rhythm game well, because a lot of people who play Hyperbeat, they haven't played rhythm games, and the game's asking you to do something new that as an adult, like you're going to suck at, you're going to get bodied, and you got to like learn how to pick yourself up and keep going. And I think that those threads we kind of just kept pulling on and applying it to artistry, applying it to relationships, applying it to mastery. And so I kind of think it kind of just came together, I would say, in a very different way than probably a lot of games narratively do.
In a weird way, I feel like the conceptual idea of Hyperbeat came together as like us kind of talking to ourselves. Like a lot of the time when the game's like, hey, it's okay to suck, but like don't, and like be kind to yourself, but also like have some standards, like, you know, like set goals for yourself and try to achieve them, and don't beat yourself up if you're not doing it, but don't stop trying.
Yeah.
And like a lot of that is like what I needed to hear at the time, because it turns out starting a studio is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like shipping Hyperbeat is by far the hardest thing I have ever done ever. It was wildly stressful. It took ungodly amounts of work. Um, yeah, and like
Yeah.
the story, there was probably like I want to say like 17 months ago from now to like 15 months ago from now, there was a point where I essentially deleted all of Hyperbeat. I say that like Hyperbeat's like the first rhythm game I made, but in a way it's kind of the third rhythm game I made. I made Hyper Night, the game jam, and then I made Hyperbeat, the game, and then I deleted it, and then I made Hyperbeat again. It was intentional. As we were shipping the game, me and Chance were talking about like things we could add, and I was realizing that like man, getting this game out, and once it's out and having to fix bugs, this code base was built off of a game jam. Like it was just continuing to extend the game jam, and like it was too much of a mess. It was really hard to maintain. I had learned over the course of making it, I had become so much better of an engineer that I was looking at my code and I'm like, wow, this is horrid. And so I sat down, sort of deleted the whole game, and spent 2 months and just did it all over. And it really paid off. Like there is like this, if you go back and play the original demo that was on Steam, you'll notice that there was like a stutter. And it was so subtle that a lot of people didn't notice it at the time. I didn't notice it. Chance didn't notice it. But then I did the refactor and I noticed like some errors that the time system was throwing, and I was like, oh, I'll try and fix those. So I did all this crazy time stuff to fix that. And then I showed it to Chance, and Chance went, what did you do? The game's so smooth.
It's like butter. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't think I changed anything. And then we went back and saw video of the demo, and I was looking at it and I was like, is that stuttering?
We were like, how did
and then
people
I like
play
pull
this?
it up and it's stuttering, and I'm like, how did nobody tell us?
Yeah.
How did we not see? We've been working on this for like a year. What
So
happened?
Yeah.
After that refactor, the gameplay portion of Hyperbeat, at least from an engineering standpoint, pretty much was done. Like, you bug fixes and some changes, but generally it was just, it didn't change from then. And what grew was we added cosmetics, we expanded the story and the number of characters, and like before that, the idea of the story didn't even have like the cutscenes or the changing cameras or anything like that. And so like everything beyond that was pretty much not the gameplay. Even I would say most of Hyperbeat's development was not the gameplay. It was everything around it. And that just is like such an interesting like way that we got here, because it was very like, we had a rhythm game and we probably could have released it as like an arcade rhythm game that just is gameplay, but I think me and Chance both looked at it and were like, we want to make something that's not that. And everything around the game was us sort of going like, yeah, this could just be an arcade rhythm game, but we want it to be more. And I think in the depths of it, it very felt like we were accidentally trying to put together like a magnum opus. We're like, oh, it's got to be perfect. It's got to have all these things. Oh, it's going to be great. And definitely that had to be cut back by the time we came out. That approach of like, we have this cool gameplay, but that's not enough for us, is why we ended up at like such a weird game.
Sure. Yeah. And so, Chance, what about for you the biggest difficulties, the biggest hurdles with this whole project, the journey of having the studio and the game and the reset?
I can answer that one.
That.
It's me. I'm the biggest difficulty.
I think that, no, honestly, I think that like the biggest challenge was just like believing that we could do it. Tucker. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I am a games outsider for sure. And I had to I had to wear so many new hats. Like, we self-published it. I got to deal with Xbox and PlayStation. Like doing contract negotiation. I think the hardest part probably was just kind of like believing that we were going to eventually get there, because just making a game is a really, really long process. And I have so much respect for everybody who decides to do this. I will say I didn't know how hard it was until I stepped into I even did the easy thing. I wasn't there programming, trying to fix bugs. You know what I'm saying? I got to do some of the fun parts, and it was still really difficult. Just kind of like believing that we were going to get there, and I'm just so glad that like we did. It just kind of felt like waiting forever, and then it was like the day finally came, and it was just like I don't know. I'm so proud of Alice in particular. Just it started almost a decade ago as a dream that we would make a game together, and we finally did.
Well, it's funny that we've gotten this far into the interview, and we haven't really talked about the music too much, which I think is another one of the defining elements of this game, is that soundtrack. And I am not a composer, and I'm a musician through... I played French horn and mellophone in high
let's
school.
go. No, you're a musician. Yeah, totally.
I haven't
French
played
horn is
in
where
a
it's
long
at.
time. Oh, I love horn.
okay.
I love my horn. If I had an extra couple $100s, I would buy myself a French horn. I don't have one, but I
Tucker,
would
you
love
should
to
do
have
it. If you ever get a windfall, it's worth it.
I'm currently on the opposite of that, which is that I don't have a car as of last week, so that's maybe a little more pressing than a horn.
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh.
But so I'm not a composer, and so I don't exactly know the process that it goes into creating these kind of songs and creating the tone of the game and creating the mood of it, and then seeing how that might match the color palette and of course level design that has to interact with that. And so I want to start where you started with choosing what this game was going to be sonically, and the instruments you were going to use and the vibes and the genres of music that you were going to go with. What was that origin story of music for Hyperbeat?
That's a great question. Because the game kind of started as Hyper Night, originally it was kind of this like Y2K. That was like kind of really what the vibe was. So I think actually everything kind of started from there. It was like I was trying to, what do I remember dance music sounding like in the 1990s, like as a child? What do I remember the early aughts, like the Eurobeat sounding like? And kind of just like trying to pull out like sonic textures from that time and then like transport it into kind of like where dance and club music is in 2025. And I think that I have to say that it started there. And then how I make albums is I just kind of just like I start an idea, and then if I open my project and that idea isn't doing anything for me, I start a new idea. And then I just keep making ideas. And then sometimes when I get stuck, I won't make another idea. I'll go back to an idea. And so I think that over the course of Hyperbeat, I probably wrote, there's so much extra material. There's like 250 songs actually, almost, of like just...
How many are in the final game?
I think there's 42 in the final game. So there's like a lot of like, and not all of it is like good. Like there's definitely, there's highlights in there.
I'd name one bad song.
Alice just hasn't heard him. She's sweet. But
what?
I will
Alice hasn't heard the songs? I don't believe that.
There's too many. For the game design element, I really have to say that like, a lot of that was all on Alice. Alice like really brought the game to life through the charting in a way that I played a lot of rhythm games, but Alice has this really good intuition where it almost feels, she describes playing Hyperbeat, and I think she's right, almost like you're dancing. Like the notes match the music in a way that I think is really, really cool. And I think that part of that is because the soundtrack is just a lot of, it's not like heavy. There are like samples obviously happening of like vocal things, but a lot of it is like carried by melody. So you can just follow these like interweaving melodies and then the counter melody and then like the chord progression, where like a lot of like dance music that is in the space, it can sometimes be more about like the rhythmic elements that are happening, because like when you're in a club, you can feel the system. You know what I'm saying? It's just kind of, it's almost like club music, but for a different purpose, which is kind of how we ended up, I think, in this like weird space. A lot of like, people call it all sorts of stuff, breakcore, jungle, like all these different things. And I think it's cool that so many different people can see so many different things in that body of work. And the B-sides, I would say that all my inspiration for that is just like playing Persona, and all those songs that come in during the social links are like playing Danganronpa, like the investigation theme when a murder happens. All these like really, I just feel like music as over the course of my life has just like set the tone for so many games, and just like really drawing inspiration from like all the things I loved about those old RPGs, trying to put that in the Hyperbeat.
Working with Chance's music was so fun on this game because like I got this phrase from there's a streamer called Asher that we love, and he's covered the game ever since our first demo came out. When that first demo came out, someone said something about the game, and they were like, oh, there's not a lot of like button pushing in this. And the way he said it was that like Hyperbeat's less about rhythm and it's more about choreography. And that stuck with me. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. Because one of the things I loved about making Hyperbeat was that, like, I've never been big on rhythm games where you just hit buttons over and over. They're just not my speed. And so making something where you're not hitting the button, you're, like, moving the joystick or the mouse was, like, really interesting to me. And after the gameplay sort of solidified itself, Chance would be like, yo, I'm working on this new track. What do you think? And he'd play it. And as it's happening, and I can hear like the synth leads going around and the rhythm in the background and things like that, I can just like in my head, I can feel the movements. It like makes me want to get up and move. And after working long enough on Hyperbeat, like I started not just wanting to move my body, but like in my head, I could see the tunnel and like the ways you could go around the circle and like, oh, that's a loop. Yeah. Chance would make music and I would listen to it. I'd be like, this is so good. I just want to move to it. And then the charts are just me listening to the music and being like, how does this make me want to move? Like, And so some of the charts are like really hard and some of them are really easy. And, definitely some people have said, and I don't necessarily disagree, that like Hyperbeat has a lot of like kind of crazy difficulty swings. But part of that is that I wasn't thinking about how difficult it was. I was just thinking like, what's this song asking? Like it's like it felt like digging up what the chart for the music was rather than like having to come up with something. And like I think like I don't think I could have worked like that with any music other than Chance's. And the soundtrack he made for this is just like so perfect for that. It just like every song is so different and it makes me feel things. There's still songs to this day that I listen to and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm feeling like emotions hit me. And a lot of the gameplay is just very like, I want to hit those expressions. Like, how do I get that in the gameplay?
One of my favorite parts about listening to the soundtrack is just for me, it really catalogs the moment in time and how I was feeling. Like I remember like one of the most joyful songs I think on the soundtrack is Runner. And I made that the day after we like showed the game for the very first time. And people's reactions were just, so they were so excited about it. And I just like sat down and I was feeling so good and just made that song. And so there's like so many, I can listen to all the songs and be like, oh yeah, I remember that's what I was feeling at that time. And so I don't know. It's very fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I imagine working on this game for so long, and it being the first major project that you guys have really put so much time into, that it's a journey and you can feel it, the growth as you look back at it. And I'm also curious, for the last sort of major element of the game we haven't talked about yet is the aesthetics of it and the checkerboard floors and how sparkly the characters are, and like typewriter lettering and like there's chains and there's stars and there's ravens and there's like it's a mishmash of a lot of interesting ideas, and I'm curious where each of these ideas come from. Were there visual elements that you tried and didn't quite work? What was the process of landing on what the game looks like from all angles?
Hyperbeat is a weird one in that I can show you like the game at different points in time. And like you can see the through line, but it looks radically different every time like we have like a major build to show off. And like there's been at least 2 times in the development where me and Chance are like, oh, we got to recut the trailer because the game just looks different than it did. And how I came about that, well, there's like 2 stories to it, depending on how much I want to pretend like I knew what I was doing.
What's the version we get today?
One, like, is that, like, I have all these inspirations of, like, I'm a big anime fan. I'm a big, like, film and, like cinema fan, like the way that shots are framed and the way that like different visual elements lead to different emotions and the way that like a camera or the angle of an object works. We've said this in the past, which is that like when people ask like, oh, is the game inspired by Rez? And the answer I think is kind of. From a pretty early on point, I told Chance that like I want this game to feel like almost like it's not a real video game, or like that like it's a game like you saw on like a friend's console that you didn't own when you were like a kid and you like only kinda remember it, but you remember seeing it and going like, what the heck is that? And so a lot of the visuals were very like, how do I evoke that? Like, I'd like reach into my mind and think like, what are these like feelings of like, that was really cool, or I really like this look that I can't point to. I can't tell you where I saw it or what it was, just that like, I can see it in my mind and I'm like, whatever it was cool. And trying to dig those sort of aesthetics out. The other side of that, the one where probably I don't know what I'm doing, is that I am a horrible 2D artist. I cannot make a picture for
this
the life
is not
of me.
true. This is
And
not. She did the achievement icons. I'm gonna. Set the
well,
record.
that's the thing. I'm really untalented
No.
from like a modeling perspective. I couldn't make like a detailed 3D model to save my life. And so like, but something that I've really enjoyed is shaders. When I shipped Freeze Climbing forever ago, my first paycheck from Valve, I was like, I want to put this into game development. And so I bought Amplify Shader Editor for Unity. And I started learning shaders and I fell in love. Doing technical art and shader stuff is my favorite thing in the world because it like, I like have this math side of my brain and I have like the artist in me, and like they both get to come out and work together when I make shaders. And so like I'm not really that great of a modeler, and I can't make a texture to save my life, but damn can I make a shader. And so the game sort of was born out of just like, I'm gonna just keep hitting this with math until it looks good.
Yeah, so the checkerboard is like not a texture. It's like it's a math function that draws that. And then like the noise pattern on the knights, like the sparkly is just like noise essentially being ran.
I think the game, if you don't count textures that we bake text into for certain effects, or a couple of VFX that are like a mesh baked to a texture, I think the total game has like 12 textures or something. Like it's literally like I have like one noise texture that I copy paste everywhere. There's a couple that are used for like different flavor, but there's like very few textures in the game because I just am not as comfortable with textures as I am with shaders. And so like that's also why all the UI in the game, there's not a single 2D element across the entire game. Everything is a 3D model because I can put shaders on it, and that's the only way I know to make it look good. So that's kind of how that was born out of it.
Yeah, well, what that reminds me of is Vib Ribbon, which is a game that is very simplistic visually, and all of its visual elements are rasterized lines that are matching this audio. It's math turned it's audio using math turned visual, and that's kind of what you're doing there. I mean, a lot of the models or the things in the game, especially in the Wellspring, are lines. You know, it's neon colors that are just like triangles and different parallelograms and miscellaneous shapes. But I like that in that it creates a visual style, and it makes a lot of sense now that I think about you trying to make a tree, but without modeling a tree. You make it out of triangles, and you make it out of just kind of vibes. It's interesting.
And actually that visual style, like deeper into development, it really started to influence the music. Like I think at the beginning, like Yellow's Book was some of the first songs that were made for the game. It was kind of a bit more glossy. And then I think when Alice started talking about this, like everything's math, I was like, cool, like I'm gonna start making songs exclusively with like analog synthesizers, like Tender. It's like that's made using like two different machines, like one for drums, one for the melodies, and it's all just waves. I kind of fell in love with this idea of like you're looking at math, you're hearing math, everything's math for a bit there.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I also want to talk a little bit about the controls, because this is something that I kept thinking about as I was playing the game. And I'm curious where the different control schemes, how they sort of came about. What was that choice like of choosing such a unique control scheme, multiple unique control schemes?
Yeah, so the game originally was controller only. If you find the hidden link to the old Game Jam page, it even says like you cannot play this with a mouse, that it will do nothing. For quite a while, that was how Hyperbeat worked. Originally, I added mouse controls begrudgingly, because I was like, yeah, okay, the OSU people will want to play the game, and I know, like, we'll be on Steam, and everyone has it's a PC, so everyone has a mouse, so I should just, it's whatever. But I didn't originally want to add it. And eventually it grew into sort of being first-class citizens with controller. But to this day, I still think the game is more fun on controller. In a weird way, I say, like, I enjoy the game on controller more, but I'm better at it on mouse and keyboard. Like, I'm more skillful on mouse and keyboard, but it doesn't have the same, like, physical feel that I feel like I get with controller. And so, like, a lot of those conceits of, like, the notes always being on the outside of the circle was because I wanted to make, like, originally the game was designed for controller, and, like, if you can imagine trying to hit notes with your joystick, like, halfway pushed, like, oh, that sounds terrible. And so, like, instead getting to, like, push the joystick all the way to the edge and just sort of roll it around, like, it adds the physicality that I think is really interesting. And that's why there's, like, the mouse lock that like sort of like your mouse can go outside but the character stays in the circle, was very to like try and give players a way to emulate that like edge of the circle where it limits how far you can go. I wanted to make sure that controller was always an option. At Microsoft, I worked as a quality analyst. Primarily, one of the roles that I took very seriously was accessibility and making sure that like our accessibility features were as good as we can get them in Age of Empires 4. And I helped a little bit with shaping the Xbox accessibility guidelines, which are like the Xbox's public, like, here's how you make an accessible game. And I kind of fell in love with accessibility because, like, it's just more people should be able to play the games that we love. And so controller is far more easy to customize and adjust for people that have accessibility concerns. And so keeping controller was very important for me, as well as like, I want to make sure that like if you play on a controller, you don't feel like you're playing a worse game, that the game wasn't designed for you. And so like we've had some people in our community ask for like, oh, custom charts having notes that are anywhere. And I'm like, yeah, but if I let you put it anywhere, what are the controller players going to do? And I don't want to say like, yeah, guys, you can exclude them. Like, I want to make sure that controller players, at least ostensibly, feel like everything is accessible to them, even if some of the things are pretty hard unless you are very experienced with a controller. So yeah, that's like sort of how the control scheme came about. And interestingly, the original Game Jam actually didn't have 2 directions, it had 4. You could swipe right, left, or up and down.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yeah, and the original idea for the control scheme was that you'd play on a controller and you would use both joysticks. So you'd move around the circle and then you'd swipe left or right with the joystick, because I loved like the physicality of that motion. But when we eventually like we were having this problem where like I wanted to make not just a rhythm game, but a rhythm game that looks good. And it turns out, if you've ever felt like rhythm games, a lot of rhythm games are kind of gaudy. They have a lot of flashing colors everywhere. And it turns out there's a reason for that. And it's that, like, there's only so many colors. And, like, making, like, 4 visually distinct colors for each direction was just feeling so cramped in the color palette. Either you got this sort of gaudy colors everywhere, or the colors were too close together, and like you couldn't really tell them apart. And so deciding to cut down to 2 was originally the idea came of like, well, if I cut down to 2, that's like 2 less colors I have to fit into this palette. And then I went, okay, it also means that like you could play with just 2 buttons. It means that people can play with just a mouse if they want, which is another way for the game to be accessible to people. It really opened the game up, and it brought a lot of creative limitation that I think really ended up working out. So it was once we cut them, I was like, oh, thank goodness those are cut. Whew. The gameplay was very like, I made this weird thing for controller, decided, okay, fine, I'll put it on a mouse, and then sort of cut down until we had what we have now.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think we've really went through almost everything I had written down. Are there any stories or elements of the game that you think we haven't covered enough that you want to make sure we hit on before we say goodbye?
Alice, I kind of want to just say how the bartenders work, just so it's out there.
Yeah.
Can we do that? Okay, yeah. So nobody's like really talked about this, but like the bartenders actually exist in real time. And so they have shifts that they'll take like over the course of the week. And there's actually a hidden bartender. I know some people have found it. A lot of people find it accidentally, but 4 works the day shift, 6 works the night shift. And then there's 2 more secret bartenders. And one of them, I don't think anybody's found. So yeah, there's like some Animal Crossing sprinkled in. And I think we're going to really try to continue that like with seasonal holiday updates and stuff like that. So. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
One step closer to making Animal Crossing.
The only other thing I want to add is just that like you never know what or when you'll stumble into something that's like very defining for your art. I think there are a lot of things in Hyperbeat that people would be extremely shocked at how late in development they were added. A great example is the bartenders didn't exist in the game until about 3 weeks before it came out. The bartenders were not in the game. Like, they just didn't exist. And then they sort of, like, we sat down, we're like, okay, the game feels like it needs something. What are we adding? And I had mentioned, like, the idea of having a bar as, like, a place. And Chance had this great idea for putting it in the center. And he was like, I want to add bartenders. Can we add bartenders? And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then like they've become like a really stable point for the game. They're one of the first characters that you talk to. And like, I think they really set the tone of the game at the beginning there. They've become so important to Hyperbeat as a structure. And they didn't exist for basically its entire lifetime. And there's other things that were added to the game so late that felt like they were just solutions to problems we had, and they've really become defining features. And it's interesting to see the way that like people look at the game and they say, oh, I love this about the game, or this is my favorite part, or whatever. And like sometimes I, when I'm really tired, I'll look at it and I'll be like, oh, I forgot we put that in. That's that like kind of didn't exist for most of I've been playing Hyperbeat for 3 years, and that was added like this month. Like, I was like, oh, that's new. That's, like, the latest patch for me. But for everyone else, like, that is what Hyperbeat is. And so it's very interesting, that, like, difference between the perspective of someone who plays it when it comes out and the developer.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think we've got a lot of really interesting stuff here. I think there's been some stories and some revelations about the game that I think make it all the more interesting. So thank you very much both for sitting down with me. Of course, everyone who's watching, you've been seeing some Hyperbeat, but make sure to go play your game yourself. I do think it's very, very cool. Yeah, just thanks for what you made, and keep on keeping on. I'm excited to see what you guys do next.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tucker.